Thanks, Sophia. I'd like to welcome everybody to our fourth e-forum, where today we're talking about creating and implementing a strategic plan for community-wide youth suicide prevention and life promotion. And my guess is that we've had some more people register and we'll have people joining us as we go. For now, we've got a nice intimate group to work with. So this forum is actually going to be a little bit different than any of our other forums. It is a forum wherein we've got three guest panelists that we're going to be interviewing, asking them some questions about strategic planning, and we get to hear from their expertise of what is happening and working locally. As I said, this is the fourth of our 5 e-forums, and these e-forums are part of Ontario Youth Suicide Prevention Strategy, which promotes the Ontario Mental Health and Addiction Strategy. What I'd like to do right now is have our interviewees wave as I introduce them, and then in a few minutes we'll have them each introduce themselves. So first off, Anne-Marie, can you wave? Good morning, Anne-Marie. Tana. There we go. And Vanessa. There we go. Okay. Our panelists will share tips from their community's experience in preparing and implementing a strategic plan for community-wide youth suicide prevention and life promotion activities. What I'd like to do is just go over a few logistics. There is going to be a recording of today's session, and that will be made online available after the event. If you would like a participation certificate from today's session, please email togethertolive@chio.om.ca, and that website email address will appear on your side screen or your chat screen. We'll also be asking our panelists 5 questions, and following that, we welcome other questions that you might have from the audience. Please direct your questions through the chat box, and we will collect those questions as we go and try and answer as many as we can at the end. Right now, what I want to do is turn it over to our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. And so, Anne-Marie, would you mind going first, followed by Tana and then Vanessa?
Sure. So, hello everybody. My name is Anne-Marie Dees, and I'm the mental health lead with the Bruce Grey Catholic District School Board. And I co-chair the Grey Bruce We Care project, which is a collaborative project, community partners, school boards, police services, for the purpose of promoting youth mental health and suicide prevention in the Grey Bruce area. So we started off fairly small. We started with South Central Grey Bruce, and we now cover all of Grey and Bruce counties.
Great, thank you, Anne-Marie. Tana?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tana Nash, and I'm the Executive Director for the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council, and I've recently taken on the role as the Executive Director for CAS, the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention, which I do 2 days a week. But I'll be talking here today about the work that we've done here in Waterloo Region, and it will be not just certainly the focus here today is youth, but our strategy is all-encompassing of all demographics, but youth is included in that. So thanks for being here, and looking forward to a lively discussion, everyone.
Good. Thank you, Tana, sorry. Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Copetti. I am a Youth Suicide Prevention Task Force intern from Thunder Bay. I work for the Children's Center Foundation, and I've been in this position for about 4 months. I'm still fairly new. The original speaker, Nancy, she sends her regrets. She was actually unable to speak today, so I'm filling in for her. So I do apologize if I don't have the answers to all of your questions, but I could try my best. She has given me some speaking notes, so like I said, I'll try my best. Also, the Youth Suicide Prevention Task Force in Thunder Bay was created in 2007, and it addresses youth mental health issues as well as tragic events like suicide.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. I'm actually very excited to have Vanessa part of this. I like the youth and the vitality that you bring to this discussion, Vanessa, and so I just really invite you to participate. And don't worry, you haven't been there long. I think we're going to value what you have to say about strategic planning, particularly as you are far closer in age to the young people that we're concerned about, rather than, I'll just say for myself, rather than myself. So thank you. So this very first question is going to go out to all of our panelists. Strategic planning, simply put, is about groups of people deciding together what they want to accomplish and how they're going to get there. As it relates to youth suicide prevention, it helps communities identify and prioritize activities that will be effective in preventing youth suicide. Beyond that, a strategic plan also outlines how to carry out identified activities. So my question to each of you, and I'll invite you to go in, whatever order. Actually, no, Tana, I'll ask you to start first, followed by Vanessa, and then Anne-Marie. So my question is, how did your task force or your council or your project come to a conclusion that a strategic plan was needed? So Tana, if you'd start us off on that.
Sure. So the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council was already around as a very grassroots organization with a number of members at the table since the late 90s. And in early 2000s, we had a number of youth suicides that took place, 4 of them in one particular high school. And so the council actually was pulled in to help support that initiative with the school board. And then at that point decided, we need to really look and formalize the work that we're doing. And so a town hall meeting was called with the community and interested organizations and members, and then decided that we're going to pull together a working group and start to develop a strategy for the community. And so that was the impetus for us.
Thank you. I often find it is those kind of issues that bring about the development of a strategic plan and the development of something that's been going on in the community to occur more strategically. So thank you. Vanessa.
Well, the original strategic plan for the Thunder Bay Youth Suicide Prevention Task Force, it basically outlined our directions and actions. It was developed in January of 2013 with an initial completion date of December 2015. Basically it was a 3-year plan, and it was largely focused on an acute response to suicide in the city of Thunder Bay. Suicide is a big issue, especially in the north, and over time the needs, stakeholder mandates, evidence, and the priorities within our community, they have been changing, as well as our degree of membership engagement. So basically because of those changes, and the fact that the 3-year plan came to an end, we started a second strategic plan, a new strategic plan.
Excellent. So you're just in the beginning stages of beginning to reevaluate. My guess is you're going to reevaluate the strategic plan that was there and determine where were we successful, what areas do we need to improve upon, and are there any new areas to address?
Yeah.
You have a lot of work ahead of you.
We do.
Yeah, great. Anne-Marie.
So the We Care project really came about through tragic circumstances, similar to what Tana referred. And we actually had been up and running for about 3 years without a strategic plan and doing lots of initiatives. And one of the things we found was we were very reactive. So if there happened to be a funding opportunity, we called them money bombs, and we would reach for that and try to figure out what we were going to do with that. And we were being very reactive with a very hardworking group of people, but we were concerned about sustainability, how we were going to sustain the momentum, and how we could be a little more focused, and really felt the need that the strategic plan really needed to help us develop an infrastructure for how we were going to move forward and how we were going to strategically identify goals so that we could take advantage of things as opposed to reacting to things. So that was pretty important for us. We kind of felt like a runaway train a little bit those first couple of years, where you're just go, 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 and reacting. And so for us, the strategic plan was really about pulling back and getting more clear and focused.
Great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Actually, our next question is going to come to you, and it's a wonderful segue to move from what you've just said into this next question that, again, is going to be addressed to you. I love the term money bombs, and you're right. I think a lot of times people are busy reacting to what is happening, be that money, be that a suicide and we've got to do something without being planful of what we're going to do, or be that a major promotional event that's happening in the community that all of a sudden you're invited to attend, but what are we going to actually showcase? So I'm looking forward to the answer to this next question. So strategic planning overall, it just doesn't happen. It really needs to be planned. It really needs to be thought through. It often requires strategical or foundational pieces to be put in place prior to developing a plan. And for example, sometimes partnerships need to be formed with youth or with families or with other individuals and agencies within the community. Other times, infrastructure needs to be established, including funding, working groups, subcommittees, and sometimes outside consultants are hired somewhere along the way. And Marie, as you know, I was privileged to be part of your day-long strategic planning meeting back in the spring. And I know that an awful lot of work was done ahead of time of that meeting, as well as a lot of work done after that meeting to actually develop the strategic plan. What I'd like you to tell us about now is what was done, what was the work that was required in advance of the beautiful strategic plan that we see and that is highlighted and showcased on the website, but what did it actually take to make that happen? So what was your pre-planning in a sense?
Our pre-planning really began right from the very beginning. So even before we realized we were doing a strategic plan, we were already in the planning mode. And that included a gap analysis, or a landscape scan, where we brought the community partners together. And we looked at what was already happening, what services and supports were available to youth and their families or caregivers in Grey and Bruce County. So we did a landscape scan with all of the partners. And because one of the things that happens when a tragic event occurs is everybody wants to help. And so everybody's coming to the table looking to do something, and we wanted to make sure that we were making an impact where it needed to be impact. So that landscape scan helped us to identify some key areas of focus, including natural helpers. So there was lots of services that seemed to support our young people in the schools and in the community, but not so much the natural helpers in community, adults and youth. So from there, what we looked at was doing focus groups with those adults and youth, natural helpers, and asking them more specifically what's happening and what do we need to do to support you. We conducted a survey in a couple of our high schools to ask kids who are your natural helpers, who are the people that you would go to. And we certainly were surprised by the finding. 86% of our kids identified natural helpers as parents. If any adult over any other adult, it was their parents or caregivers, which was really exciting news for us. But so those kind of things helped to focus where we wanted to go. Once we had that piece done, we developed the terms of reference as a group and a memo of understanding that we had all agencies and partners sign up on. That was really an important piece for us. It was a long process when you have 14 different partners around the table. I'm sure Tana and Vanessa can speak to that too. It's not easy to come to an agreement or to a general agreement around the terms of reference, but we did manage to do that and to get an MOU that was then signed by all the partners. We also looked at branding, because that was one of the things that youth and adults told us, is that we needed a really clear brand of who we are and what we're going to do. And from that, the name We Care came out of that. And CARE stands for Connect, Ask, Reach, and Engage. and that was the branding exercise that we did. And then we developed a website because one of the first things we talked about was how do we let people know we're here, how do we gather information, how do we push information out. And certainly the young people told us loud and clear social media needed to be part of our structure. So we were already kind of getting some ideas and putting some things together. We developed a website that became currently the flagship of the We Care project. But that's what it is a flagship. It's not the work that's happening underneath is much more deeper. So kind of plugging along with all three of those things happening, the terms of reference, the MOU, the branding, and the website, that's where the train was getting a little crazy for us, and we really felt it was time to get a strategic plan in place. And what the strategic plan has allowed us to do is to go much deeper into the issue of youth mental health and suicide prevention and what we need to do as a community to support stronger supports for youth and young people in general. In doing our strategic plan, we really felt that we needed an outside consultant to come in, that there were 14 partners at the table, all of which were probably really capable of supporting a strategic plan, but we really felt we needed an objective third party with the 14 agencies just to bring that objectivity to the table and help us look at things that we maybe hadn't considered, or to help us flush out some of the things we were trying to accomplish. So we were very fortunate to bring in an outside consultant who's actually online with us today. That's Mariella. So she was able to work us through that strategic plan. So I hope I answered your question there okay.
You did. You did. Before I come back to Vanessa and Tana for some comments, we've got a couple minutes. You used a term that I know I like, but I'm not sure everybody else might even know what we're talking about. So when you talk about natural helpers, could you take a couple minutes just to describe what do you mean by natural helpers? Because I know they're pretty key in your website and in the work that you do.
Yeah. So natural helpers are the folks that young people would naturally turn to for support if they were feeling overwhelmed. So that includes parents, caregivers, coaches, classroom teachers. Again, in our findings, young people really want to connect with their parents and with their guardians. And we also look at natural helpers, youth natural helpers, because there's, kids turn to kids very quickly, and there's a whole network of young people there that carry that burden, and I'm going to use the word burden because sometimes it can be overwhelming for them. So we're really looking at how to support those natural helpers. One of the things we found was we were doing lots of targeting of youth themselves around mental health awareness, stigma reduction, suicide prevention. But then the youth having that conversation back in community, that conversation wasn't happening at the community level. So it was creating barriers.
Yeah. So Anne-Marie, I think, if I'm correct, when you did your prep to do strategic planning and you realized the importance of the natural helpers, if I remember correctly, your strategic plan actually has points to address and to build and support natural helpers.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for natural helpers to be the bridge to the more formal support.
Excellent. Thank you. So Vanessa and Tana, I'm not sure who might like to go next. If you would like to comment on anything that you might have, things that might have occurred within your communities or within your task force around how did you, what did you need to do before you were able to develop the strategic plan? So did you pull on those skills from within the group? Did you hire an outside consultant? Were you aware that any additional connections needed to be made, or were you able just to step in immediately into strategic planning? So I'm not sure. Vanessa, maybe I'll just ask you first. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I think I just wanted to add about the importance of the youth focus groups. That's something we're really focusing on lately because since we are a youth suicide prevention task force, it's pretty vital to get their opinions. So I just wanted to say that that's something we're definitely working on, to engage more youth. It's really important.
Well, you know, Vanessa, on that note, just recently we did an e-forum on youth engagement. So, you know, it's just, to me, it's really significant that you're highlighting that. Could you give communities that are either listening now or maybe listening later a couple of ideas of how it is that Thunder Bay plans on engaging youth and grabbing youth input into the upcoming strategic plan?
I'm not 100% familiar. I just started becoming the youth group committee, so it's still in the early stages, so I don't have all the answers for that right now.
Well, you know, you might, you know, it's interesting you say you don't have the answers, but I think you just gave us a key insight. You are part of a youth engagement committee. And so that in and of itself tells me that at least in Thunder Bay, and I know other communities as well, are actually developing committees that include youth, that are active with youth, that are talking to youth in the way that youth want to be chatted with and engaged with, and getting their input about suicide. And my guess is you're not going to be sitting around a table talking about suicide all the time. You're probably going to be doing some fun activities and getting input at the same time. So,
and we're trying to focus more on life promotion as opposed to suicide.
Yeah. That's exciting. Thank you, Vanessa. Tana, anything that you'd like to add to this question?
Just a couple of things. We, too, hired an outside consultant. We felt that it was important to bring somebody in that could work with the group. And although we already had a council that was in existence, we decided to actually start a working group specifically on the strategy. So it was, some members were the same, but then we pulled in additional partners and some folks that had kind of that skill set of really looking at strategic direction and what does that look like. So that was a really important step for us, is having like a working group. And we too had many members. So there were, I think, were 17 members on the working strategy group. Wow. And I would say we did have some community members involved because our strategy initially started as just, it's not just a youth suicide prevention strategy, and I think because, too, it was 10 years ago, there wasn't as much engagement, and so as we've evolved over the years, we now work with many groups that we have here locally, youth engagement groups such as WAVE, which runs through CMHA, and our lead agency is here at Lutherwood, which is where I'm housed, and so we work with the youth here, and they have a youth engagement group, because I do agree that that's a really important voice, and the other important voice is family members, who are often the ones that are so important because they're the ones that are helping youth or working their way through the issues, and so they're really important as well. And so we have a great Parents for Children's Mental Health group here locally so that we work with them. But that's been an evolution for us over the years.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I do invite those in the audience, if you do have some questions, just enter them in the chat box, and staff at the Center of Excellence will be collecting those, and we'll be answering them at the end of the session. Tana, I'm going to put you back on the spot in a second. This next question comes to you. And just a little bit of a background. Part of strategic planning process requires us to understand and explore what is happening within our local context with respect to youth suicide, with respect to life promotion activities and other things that are happening, and for us to be aware of what are some of the recommended best or promising practices in the area of youth suicide prevention. What I'd like us to do is look at the things that communities can do to strategically address areas of suicide. And Tana, my question for you is, what did the Waterloo region do to explore the local community context before diving into prioritizing and planning specific activities?
Okay, I'm going to walk through a little bit of what we initially did, which was 10 years ago, and then some of the work that we've been doing recently, because as I said, it's been evolving. So initially when we got together, the strategic plan was initially developed in 2005 and then released in 2006. And it did start with a town hall meeting, so first of all, getting information from the community at large, and then working with all the strategic partners. And in our strategic document, and I think Sophia is going to post the link to that, there was an environmental scan done of what are all the services available, both, and again, adult and youth, but specifically youth. So there's 3 pages of them that were all documented and included, and then the statistics. And we work very closely with public health here, who releases our statistics. And then since we've developed the strategic plan, the police in the last 5 years have been tracking actually as well numbers. And so we also work with them on statistics. So kind of doing that scan was what initially informed the strategic direction. And then we established 5 key pillars that we would do our work, that all our work would kind of fall under, because we don't provide the frontline service. So that wasn't our focus. So the first 5 pillars that we developed in our plan was a commitment to increase the community participation, to participate in a strategy, and so reaching out to participating organizations, agencies, family members about the fact that this is an important initiative and that it takes a community to look at suicide prevention. And our second objective was public awareness, to increase that public awareness, and that really involves a great deal of work with the media. Anne-Marie, you talked about the word reaction and reacting, and at one point, especially with media too, we were reacting, so the media would call us when something had taken place, a suicide had taken place, and they wanted us to comment. And so we've really worked hard with the media and have a great relationship here locally where we just talk about things that they can be doing all the time rather than just reacting to something. So that was a key focus as well. The third objective was prevention, and look at, as a community, and addressing the gaps and looking at ways that we could look at suicide prevention. The fourth objective was training and education, and although we're not the ones that do the training, we work very closely. We have a community training team, but our role, we see it as kind of, I call it stirring the pot, but facilitating dialogue with different groups and encouraging them to get training around suicide prevention. So you're a Brownie leader, you're a guide leader, you're a coach. You have physical first aid training, and that's mandated through getting your level 1 coaches in Canada, but have you considered getting suicide prevention training and emotional training? So working very hard that way. And then the last objective was advocacy, and advocating for more changes and policies to be implemented. So that's what we focused on. And just thinking, so I will say this too as a comment, because I've been here for 7 years now, but so I wasn't part of the initial planning process. But what I had learned as well is that family members, we tried to have many family members kind of on the working council or on the strategy, but we found that the business of the council was too much, so we've engaged them in different ways. So we have volunteers that help us in different ways in helping advance the direction. So they might go to a presentation that's at a school, or and have a display board, or helping to set World Suicide Prevention Day activities, but not so much around the actual table. And then we draw them in at other times and in other ways. So that was an important learning for us as well along our journey. And then 5 years into the plan, in the fall of 2011, we did an update to the community, which we found was really important. So we drew together, we had about 60 stakeholders, family members, and we invited all of the folks that have been part of it, but then kind of anybody doing work in suicide prevention, and we provided an update and said, okay, here are the 5 key pillars, and then here are all the actions that we have accomplished in that time frame. And one of the goals when the original strategy was laid out was to hire a coordinator. And so that's where I came into the picture, and I initially was hired part-time, 14 hours a week, through funding through a memorial golf tournament. And so during that presentation, we did an update and showed all of the things that we've been able to accomplish. And imagine if we could have somebody full-time, and we did an appeal to the community. And at that point, we then had members of the community come forward. And then that's when my position became full-time, was because of that update to the key stakeholders. We also engaged the media, so there's another example of being proactive. We didn't want the media at the event because we wanted people to speak freely about what we had done or to ask questions without feeling scrutinized by the media. So what I did to the media, or what I offered to the media, though, was I released the strategy update for them that morning so that they could report on it in the news that day, which they did, as a way of being proactive. And then since then, we continue to evolve, as I was mentioning, and when the WHO, the World Health Organization, came out with their report in the fall of 2014, Preventing Suicide, a Global Imperative, there's a great page, and I wrote down the page 31, that basically is a great environmental scan that the World Health Organization deems important. And so we've taken that environmental scan, and I know Sophia's going to put that up because I have it on the Together to Live site. And it talks about universal prevention strategies, selective and indicated. So there's 12 key strategies that the World Health Organization has deemed important. And so under that, we have done kind of boxes that say currently what are we doing in our community, and then what are the gaps, and I like to call them opportunities. What are the opportunities for making changes in those areas? And so that's been helping us to inform our priorities as we move forward. So we continue to review each year kind of where we're at, and then we move forward. So we have a strategy planning day. We didn't always have it every year. We'd have a little bit, but the last 3 years now we've had a one-day strategic planning day and continue to do that. And so when we met this November, we actually took those 5 initial pillars and kind of modified them a bit and said, okay, let's put them into 4 pillars. So we've changed that a little bit. And one of the pillars now is research and evaluation. And that too has, I'm going to say, changed over the years, where we were paying attention a little bit, but of course there was nobody leading the charge until I came in, and when everybody's doing it off the side of their desk, how challenging it is. So we started to track as much as we could. We track numbers. Where we're still struggling now, and I'll be frank with this, is around the impact. So how do you assess the impact of what you're doing with the suicide prevention? So one of our key priorities this year for 2016, we've pulled together our local LIN, who we know has some research behind it and has the resources that we don't. And we're pulling together a brainstorming session around how do we really get a handle, and not just the numbers of who's dying by suicide, but we really want to get a better assessment of about the person and doing a psychological autopsy, and also overlaying the numbers, because the police are collecting data, the hospital collects data, or Canadian Mental Health is collecting data on the stress lines, and then we have these suicide statistics. And also we've come to discover that when I look at the suicide statistics for our region from public health, which follows the World Health Organization, versus the Ontario Office of the Coroner, there's actually discrepancies in every year. So why is that? And then how do we make that so that they're all the same? And so we're currently looking at that. So that is a big priority for us moving forward.
Wow. Tana, thank you. There's a lot that you have said, but my curiosity is, you had 5 pillars: increasing community participation, public awareness, prevention, training and education, advocacy, and then you've come down to 4. But
what are they?
And you have one that's called research and evaluation. So I'm a little curious, like, what did you do? Which ones did you amalgamate? Maybe, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what the 4 are that you currently have.
I do, because they're in front of me all the time on my bulletin board, so I never lose sight of our direction.
Okay.
So on there it has our mission and our vision, and we actually put our values a couple of years ago. It just naturally came out, all these lovely words like, my life matters, love, respect, your voice matters. And so we put it into a heart, so that's in the middle. So now it's community awareness, training and education remains there, partnership and capacity building, we kind of moved in a couple of those and research and evaluation.
Thank you.
Because over the years, and it depends on which government's in power, but our former government didn't like the word advocacy as a charitable organization, which is why we moved that word out of there. So even though we continue to advocate, and that's what we do, we don't say that anywhere in any of our documents anymore.
Right. Okay.
So those are the 4 key pillars that we're working on.
Great, thank you. I have another question for you. And you mentioned that in your actually, you talk about having a strategic planning day about each year is what you aim for. And my question is, how many people go to that? And is there a time where a certain number, it's a great number to strategic plan with, but a certain number becomes too big? Or how do you handle that? How many people typically show up at a strategic planning session?
No, good question, and we're continuing to review this. So currently it's our council members, and we have a large council. Our council operates as a board, even though it says it's a council. So we have 18 members, including attempt survivors and those bereaved. So that's who has been at the strategy day, although we have been wrestling or rumbling the idea of doing something on World Suicide Prevention Day, which is when we always host our annual general meeting, and thinking, because we always have a large community participation, and wondering if that might be an opportunity for some kind of hour forum or something that then draws in the community more, because we think we need to engage them more. And I think through social media too, and as well as even things like SurveyMonkey, like how can we ask questions and get it out more publicly. So those are questions that we're looking at for next year.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to throw this now back to Anne-Marie and Vanessa. I'm not sure if there's anything they would like to add. So the question was about how do we look at our community context with respect to youth suicide? How do we explore that, as we prepare or as part of our strategic planning? And what about looking at recommended best practices for suicide prevention and life promotion? So I've kind of combined that question into a longer one, but is there anything, Anne-Marie or Vanessa, that you'd like to add to what Tana has said?
I don't think I have anything specific to add.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to just add that, so the community context piece from Bruce Grey is a little bit different because we're a very rural community and very spread out, with a lot of our services centralized in our one city, which is Owen Sound, but that could be an hour and a half away for some people, or 2 hours away from some people elsewhere in the county. So it was pretty important for us to look at the community and consider that in our planning, because the services in the area are not visible in most parts of Grey and Bruce. It's not that they're not there, but they don't have the same presence that they do in a city.
Yeah.
And so that piece has been really big in terms of local context for us, is making sure everybody knows what is actually available, what services are out there, and how to access them. So that's been a big part of our strategy. And then really listening to the rural voice, youth and adults, around what's happening for them and what is it that they need to have happen. So those were really important contexts for us. And we don't have the luxury of a full-time coordinator or even a part-time coordinator, Tana.
Yeah.
So this is a working group where everybody plays a role and everybody's very actively involved in it. So that has impacted kind of where we are and what we're able to do. We've done amazing things considering, it's something from nothing, basically, is what we're doing. But I did want to also emphasize the lens, when you're looking at your community, the lens of each partner. Because everybody that comes to that table to talk about youth suicide or mental health comes from a very different perspective. The police services are viewing that from a very different lens than the school boards, than the children's mental health or public health. It's just, just listening to those voices has been really significant for us, as well as the youth voice and the adult voice in the community. So I just wanted to highlight that as a follow-up, because I think there's a difference rural versus city.
Do you know, and Anne-Marie, I think that's one of the things that makes this panel great, because we've got those that are more representing a city context, because we know that Ontario has some pretty big urban areas, and then we also know that a lot of Ontario is more in that urban context. So thank you for bringing that up. Thunder Bay, I think, I mean, you guys cover a great area as well, because you've got the city of Thunder Bay, but then you've got huge areas surrounding that. So thank you for highlighting that. I'm going to move us on to our next question, and this question is going to go to Vanessa. So Vanessa, you know, as you know, setting goals collectively after you've explored your local context can help a community figure out where the community coalition wants to go. So based on those goals, there's a range of possible activities surrounding community efforts towards targeting suicide. Vanessa, how did Thunder Bay get to a point of using the information, or how did they use the information gathered from exploring their local context to both create goals but also to prioritize the goals? And then what goals did Thunder Bay set?
Okay, so the initial strategic plan was designed to respond to our community in crisis. Suicide in the north, as you know, is a really common occurrence. The objective for the task force at that time was to develop a coordinated response to youth suicide within our community. So we developed a fan-out protocol. We partnered with a whole bunch of agencies, and it was developed in collaboration with community stakeholders and more of the larger server providers and school boards from within city limits. So basically a fan-out protocol outlines like the duties of an acute response team. So if there is a tragic event, we do call in a response team. Also, evaluation is outlined within the protocol document, which mostly is comprised of recorded debriefing that happens after an event. And accountability and engagement was supported through the work of the task force. Also, the task force has a website called here'sthedeal.ca, where we run a series of campaigns and materials to help raise awareness around mental health and reducing the stigma, and to increase gatekeepers through assist and safe talk trainings. Also, the task force saw much success and is a testament of what coordinated approach to suicide looks like. However, it has some shortcomings that we hope to improve on. Also, we drew upon national and provincial guiding documents to develop overarching framework to construct our new strategic directions. And we presented this to our broader task force for feedback at a strategic planning forum. And basically what we found is that suicide still remains a high priority in our community and for our stakeholders. And we also need to find a better definition of what youth means in terms of our population. Also, diversity, inclusivity, mental health promotion, and life promotions are what we strongly want to focus on, especially in Thunder Bay. And youth engagement and involvement needs to be improved upon as well. And we are working on the youth engagement, as I already said. And basically, from these findings, we agreed on a few activities in our planning stages for our strategic plan. And the first one is that youth should be inclusive of post-secondary settings to be more mindful of student mental health. With a revamp of the strategic directions, we ensured to be inclusive of a diversity and inclusivity pillar, as well as a mental health promotion pillar, as opposed to suicide. And given that it is a youth suicide prevention task force, like I said, we want the opinions of the youth. That is the most important thing. And also, we found that our membership engagement was lacking. So we created, we restructured our committees basically. So we have a stakeholders committee, an advisory committee, and then our working group committees. And we shared this with our broader task force, and we got members to assign themselves to which committee they felt they could offer more of themselves to. And since that, we've noticed an increase in activity, especially in our working group committees, and more consistency in our meeting attendee numbers.
Thank you, Vanessa. Vanessa, I appreciate that when you introduced yourself, you let us know that you were the intern there and you've been there 4 months. So I have some questions. If you know the answer, great, and if you don't, I mean, that's fine. One of the things, and probably one of the last things that you commented on that caught my attention, was the working group. So you've got a stakeholder committee, which my guess is those would be, you know, your stakeholders. You've got an advisory committee. I'm guessing maybe a little bit of a smaller committee, but I don't know. So maybe, and I don't know if you can answer this, could you maybe tell us what is the difference between the advisory committee and the stakeholder committee?
Basically, if you're on the stakeholders committee, we meet basically once a year. We haven't had that meeting yet, so I haven't been a part of that, but they're the people that will join us once a year, see what's going on with the task force. Our advisory committee meets bi-monthly, so every 2 months, where we discuss, again, what's going on in the task force. But also our working groups, we meet probably every month. So we have a working group for the fan-outs. Also, the youth engagement is another separate group, as well as our Here's the Deal website. We haven't started that yet, but that will be another working committee. And yeah, so the working committees see each other more often, basically.
Excellent.
And, yeah.
So on your, just out of curiosity, on your youth engagement committee, how many people roughly do you foresee would attend something like that?
I'd say about 6 or 7. It's pretty,
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty good with a more smaller, intimate group.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. You know, you raised a question, or what you indicated was the community raised a question, which is, how do we define youth? And even though in my mind I often think, oh, I know what youth are, I have sat with other communities and I too go, so how old are youth? So as you think about that, or the community or the committee has expanded that to include post-secondary age youth. Have they put an age limit on it, or just post-secondary, and so we're from, you know, young person, young, up to post-secondary, or did they actually put an age limit to that?
See, I'm not entirely sure. I think everyone has their own idea of what youth means. Like, I mean, I thought I did. Apparently, some people think 24 is the cutoff age. Other people, I've heard lately that it's a lot older than that. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm thinking that's where we draw the line, maybe around the university age. But I also wanted to bring up, though, that suicide is a problem for a big deal of the population, not just youth. So maybe we can look into something like that and just include everyone and not just youth. That's just what I'm thinking, but I think we draw the line around university age. That's what
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to just repeat the question so we can just kind of draw our discussion back in, and then ask if Tana or Anne-Marie wants to add anything. So based on the goals that were explored when you were developing your strategic plan, there was probably lots of different activities that could have been determined. So my question to Tana and Anne-Marie, if they want to add anything to this, is how did you use your information to prioritize and craft your goals, and what goals did you set? So Tana and Anne-Marie, I'm not sure if you have anything additional you want to add. If not, I've got just some final questions to ask.
So, yeah, I would mind. Sorry, Tana. Go ahead.
Okay, Emery. I'll hop in just for a moment. And certainly for us, the statistics is a guiding factor for sure. And so as I mentioned, because we're all demographics, right now we've had a focus on the middle-aged male. And so we're doing a lot of work there. But then with our youth, we're working very strongly with our mental health leads. We have, through Canadian Mental Health Association, an excellent program called WAVE. It's youth engagement, so we help to support that. And often when we're looking for ideas, then we draw on, we'll go and ask them kind of for focus groups and get information. So we work that way. So I think that's really important. So even though we don't have like a youth suicide prevention plan, we take a look at what's already taking place in the community. So for example, we just redeveloped a new youth brochure. And Vanessa, you talked about focusing on life promotion, and we've certainly had a switch here in Waterloo region, and everything from images to the wording we use. And so the My Life Matters slogan has been really important to us, showing positive images. So that's been really important. Sorry, just to share my screen. So there we go. I think I'm back. So we take a look at the scan, see what's taking place in the community, where the gaps are, and then look at what's already existing. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, especially with the youth piece, because there's a lot of great stuff going on. We look at how we can enhance it and work together as a community to advance it. And I just wanted to comment, too, on the youth piece. I think that's a really great point that you raised, and certainly I live in a region with three post-secondaries, 2 universities and a college with a total population, just those three, of 65,000. That's a community in itself. And it's something that keeps coming up because technically, I'll say from before, it's like 18 is the cutoff for youth. And then we have this post-secondary gap. But we've got a huge issue going on, and we know with our post-secondary schools that mental health issues are running really high. Suicide attempts are up, and completed suicide. So just taking a look at that, I just think that was a really good point to add.
Thank you. Anne-Marie, I think you wanted to say something. I'm wondering if there's something else that you'd like to add to that discussion.
Yeah, I wondered if I could even just have the strat plan goals pop up. I think they're ready to go there to be shared with people. Because one of the things in our strat plan, when I talked about our terms of reference, we actually had 9 goals in our terms of reference, and one of the things our consultant suggested was that we needed to narrow those down and be a little more focused in our goals. So we have 4 goals, with youth kind of being the center of those 4 goals. So the youth engagement, and really developing those dynamic partnerships with youth to raise awareness and understanding of youth mental health and suicide prevention. Sorry, if you want to just give the bubbles there. Yeah, that's good. And then the second goal we had was to impact the natural helpers, and again, based on our community context, that's what we were hearing, that we needed to target both adults and youth who are in that natural helper role. And the third goal was around community engagement, again, recognizing that these are everybody's young people and they don't belong to one particular area. And we really needed to work with businesses and community in general around this issue. And then our all-encompassing goal is really our sustainability as an organization, so the We Care infrastructure and having that in place to help support all of the other pieces. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and all of our goals, we really target age 12 to 25. That's our target audience, recognizing that there's probably a little bit on each end of those that we're going to encompass, but that's our target audience. So we have those 4 key goals that we're working through, and we have strategies based in all of those goals that are trying to get at that mental health awareness, suicide prevention piece around our vision and mission statement. We have 4 main initiatives that keeps our committee hopping. We have the web-based resource that I talked about. We have a grade 9 promotional campaign that really again, gets the message out there about what's available in our communities. Then we have a media and promotion campaign, and then every year now we're doing a share event where we bring adults and youth together to have a conversation about mental health and suicide prevention. So those four tasks really kind of prop up the work that we're doing and give us a visible presence in the community. And then those four goals are what we're working on a regular basis. And we're also, we just received funding for a collective impact grant to look at what is actually happening in the rural communities of Bruce and Grey that's impacting suicide in youth. And so we're going to be looking deeper at what are some of the systemic issues that are happening in our area.
Great. Anne-Marie, thank you. I'm going to just make a plug the Together to Live website right now. One of the things that I really, really like about the Together to Live website is the Communities in Action page. And so a lot of what has been presented in the chat box, the links that are available, as well as the information that Anne-Marie just showed, as well as other information Tana had been speaking about their environmental scans. All of that can be found on the Together to Live website if you go to the Communities in Action page, and then on the right-hand side, scroll down, and there'll be a phrase where it says See All Communities, and if you click on each name, that takes you into further information. So one of the things that I have found as one of the youth suicide prevention coaches is try to join communities with each other so that when communities have questions about how to do something, to be able to refer them to other communities on what they're working at. And so that can also now be found in the Communities in Action. So as we get closer to wrapping up, we've got about another half hour to go. I'd like to take about the next 15 minutes or so and walk through 3 questions. And then that will leave time for if there are any questions coming in from the audience. So one question, and it's really easy, back to everybody. What was one key success factor of your strategic planning process? And I'm not sure who would like to go first. Okay, thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, so basically one key success factor we had was an established foundation of practice and a large membership to pull from, and also having a few key members willing to take on leadership roles.
Thank you. And that is so important to have a group large enough that you're not burning people out, and yet also having people willing to say, yeah, I'll step up and do this. Tana or Anne-Marie, anything you'd like to add? Key success factor?
Sure, I can add something here. For us, the piece was the reporting back to the community. So once we established something, really reporting back to the community, and actually that became the springboard to get us more funding and get us support, because we were able to showcase and highlight all of the activities that we were able to bring to the community when we didn't have anybody with funding or anybody kind of at the helm. And so that was a definite springboard, but it really kind of brought the community together to say, yes, this is important, and to keep the finger on the pulse. So that reporting back piece has been really important.
Excellent. And Anne-Marie?
I think for our group, one of the key successes was developing an infrastructure, and really, and that infrastructure. So if you remember that slide I showed with the encompassing circles, really having that infrastructure really helps us to move forward. And again, because we don't have a coordinator, so everybody needed to step up and take some pieces of this pie. And that strategic plan really helps people sort out where they fit in and how they could do that. We created portfolios, so we now have a team that writes proposals for us for funding opportunities, but we have much more clearer objectives and what it is we're trying to accomplish through those funding proposals. And we've kind of divided up all of the tasks of the committee that way, consolidating the 4 key things that we're working on every year that I talked about. That was tremendously supportive to have that as come out of the strategic plan. You know, was it worthwhile? Is it things that we wanted to continue to do? And just the fact that having the strategic plan has now allowed us to go deeper into the issue of what's really happening, what are the systemic issues in rural Ontario that we can address.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne-Marie. I've had the privilege of being the youth suicide prevention coach with the Grey Bruce area and therefore sitting in on a number of their meetings. And one of the strengths that I see from the Grey Bruce Committee is that they have, and they may have called different names, but I call them working groups. They have divided their larger overall committee into active working groups, so people are working at different things. And again, they may call them different, but my guess is they've probably got a youth engagement committee. I know they've got a financial committee. And so people are able to work in their areas of strength. And I think the committee overall has become stronger by allowing people to do what they do well and encouraging that. So thank you. What in the strategic planning process was one challenge that you faced? And so I'm going to just change the order up, Tana, and maybe we'll go Tana, Anne-Marie, and then Vanessa. What was one challenge that you faced?
I'll speak for like the strategy days that we're currently having because I'm part of those now when we're setting the priorities for each year. And I'd say one of the biggest challenges is the number of people because you want as many people engaged, but then trying to funnel it in and to make sure that at the end of the day you have something that you agree upon that you're going to work toward so that you can leave the day and everybody can say, yes, this is what we're working on. These are our priorities. We feel good about this. And so making sure that there's some real good action items that are at the end of the day is really important to us because when you're bringing people together for a whole day, that's a lot of people's time. And so making sure that it's worthwhile.
Yeah. And I can see that, and that I think was one of the questions I may have asked you or one of the other panelists was about the numbers because you do want to hear from everybody and you do want everyone to leave feeling like their voice has been heard, but if you have 100 different people with 100 great ideas, you're going to get nothing done. So thank you for sharing that. Anne-Marie, what's one of the challenges that the committee in Grey Bruce has faced?
I think one of our biggest challenges was just coming to the recognition that not every partner is at the same place.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And coming to terms with, you know, people are going to meet you where they can, and that doesn't necessarily mean where you want, but that it's okay. And kind of working around that and helping people kind of understand that we're going to get there, but it might look different than what we originally thought just because of, I mean, when you have 14 different partners, they've all got their own things on their own plates and issues that they're dealing with. And so that, I think that was our biggest challenge, was just coming to terms with that and being okay with that. And my favorite term, slowing down to speed up, like just, you know, backing right off and really doing a good job systematically. And not feeling that, I keep referencing my runaway train, but so we've got that brake on now, right? And that's been a challenge, just kind of pulling people back. And I just, you know, just reviewing our strat plan for today, one of the things that is an ongoing challenge is just being ambitious, right? And it's well-intended. I looked at our timelines yesterday and thought, oh dear. Yeah. We're going to have to do some revamp. So the idea of a strategic plan every year is probably a good idea to look at it and review and set new timelines because we're ticking some boxes, but definitely that's always a challenge, is trying to do too much at once.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy because I remember being there in May when you were looking at it, and then back in September when we looked at the final document and putting dates to it. And it's really easy to say, oh, yeah, I can get this done in 3 months. And somebody else says, yeah, I can do that in the next 4 months. And somebody else says, I can get that done in 2 months. And then we get back to our day-to-day jobs. and our day-to-day requirements. And I call it about the tyranny of the urgent, that, you know, you've got to respond to what's there. Not always, you don't always get to do what you want to do, that sometimes we're busy putting out fires. So I like your phrase, slowing down to speed up. So thank you, Anne-Marie. Vanessa, one of the challenges that the Thunder Bay Committee faces regarding strategic planning.
It's a lot of what you guys already pretty much mentioned. There are a lot of people that have a lot on their plates, and things might not get done as soon as we hope to have them done. But also funding, I'd have to say, is a challenge we faced. I don't know the details about that, but I do know it is a challenge, not only for us, for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge that I've heard across the communities that I've supported over the last while with the youth suicide prevention, being a coach, is the funding. In some ways it would be nice if there was this huge pot of money, and yet I sometimes think with a huge pot of money, I'm not sure if we would see all of the collaboration occurring and all of the great things where people are stepping up to take on more and do more. So I know there's value in funding, but I also know there's a lot of strength that is available in each of the communities that you can really pull on when the funds are maybe a little tight. So yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. So what would be your advice that you would give to other communities? I mean, there's people listening today. There's going to be people listening afterwards when this is posted online. What's some of the advice that you would give to other communities if they were looking at doing strategic planning, or if they've done one and now it's time to revamp? And I'll just let you go in whatever order works for the three of you.
I can go first. So a couple of things I'd say that we've learned, because our council's been around for 20 years, and then the strategic plan, the initial document, is 10 years. And those passionate people will burn out. And so something we've really had to pay attention to is, you know, that sustainability factor, how to draw in more people to keep that momentum going, and to pass the torch, or for them to pass the wisdom of what's taken place. So that's been a really key factor. So always looking at how to keep that momentum going and looking down the road as well. So that's one piece of advice I would suggest. Building an evaluation from the beginning, because funding so much depends on that. I don't have all the great answers for that. I'm always looking for ideas on that. Certainly we're paying attention wherever we can to that and reporting back with as many numbers as possible to the community so that they know what we're doing and tracking what we're doing. So I think that's really important. And I just think the engaging, like continuing to engage with as many people as possible. And because youth have amazing ideas, right? Like that's where some of the great ideas come from. So really listening to our youth. This is for them, so you need to pay attention to them.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Tana. Building an evaluation is so very important, because you're right. When people are looking at extending funds to committees, they're often saying, so what have you done? And how can you prove that what you've done is actually working? So good, thank you. Anne-Marie or Vanessa, who would like to go next?
I can go. Basically, build a framework for evaluating engagement. And also, I think a really important thing is it's extremely helpful when you have members at the table that can actually incorporate task force activities into their working budgets. That helps at the cost of a lot of things, like meeting spaces and food, and especially honorariums, like for the youth groups. I think that's really important, and it helps a lot.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And it is important, those gifts in kind. Sometimes it's harder to put a dollar value on them, but I don't think most community committees can run without those gifts in kind, the meeting space, the time, the photocopying, et cetera, et cetera. So great, thanks. Anne-Marie, that leaves you.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add. I would agree with what Tana and Vanessa both said. And maybe just the only other addition is just to know that there are lots of ways of doing things. And so creativity and being open to what the youth put forward or what other partners put forward is so critical. I know personally I've learned so much from the We Care Committee, and just great ideas and suggestions, and so mining the people that are at the table, because there's a lot of power in information and knowledge that sits around our table, and besides the passion. So I would maybe just add that piece around being open to creative ideas.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and that is important. Those creative ideas help keep us fresh, help keep us going, yeah, and gives us energy, I think, sometimes. Great. I'm going to just ask a question. We've got a couple questions that have come from those listening, except they just disappeared. Give me a second. Thank you. There we go. And so this first question comes from Judy Tyson, and she says that you have hired outside consultants to do strategic plans. And I know, Tanya, I believe you mentioned you hired a consultant. Anne-Marie, you mentioned that you hired a consultant. I don't know about Thunder Bay. And her question is, can you develop those skills in internal stakeholders for future value? And sorry, I may have stumbled in reading that. So can the skills of what is needed to actually do strategic plan, can those skills be developed in internal stakeholders for future? Comments on that?
Yeah, I can. I'll respond to that, Judy. So although we hired a consultant for our initial strategy plan, our full-day strategy days that we've been hosting now, we are actually using the strength of our council members. And we've debated about this. Do you bring somebody in? But we've also recognized that because, just like Anne-Marie said, there's so much wealth of knowledge around the table, and we have the skill set. So what we've been doing is chunking out the day and having different facilitators for different sections, but that are already part of the plan and intimately know the work that we're doing and are trying to, and they know what we're trying to accomplish. And so that's been the process that we've been using. So we have been using our internal folks.
Excellent. Thank you. Anne-Marie or Vanessa, do you have anything to add to that? Can we develop those skills within the team, within the community, or do we need to rely on outside consultants? Because part of the reality with that is that it can be costly.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that. However, in my notes, we have not hired an outside consultant, but we did have some with the Ontario Centre of Excellence for our child and youth mental health, who helped facilitate a forum day, and that's all I can say about that. That's all I know.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. And I think I remember that, and they did come up and give a hand on the day. So that is the reality. I mean, there might be help available through the Center of Excellence. Any other comments, or I'm going to move on to one more question?
I just was going to comment on the value of the outside consultant initially, just because there's so many competing interests. I know we're all at the table for the same reason, but there's so many competing interests with all the partners, that just having that objectivity moves you through that lesson a lot quicker. And we certainly had people at our table who had the skill and could have done the strategic plan. We also had people at the table who, after the strategic plan, said, I'm going to go back and do this in my own organization. So there was definitely some internal capacity building by bringing in the external.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking of creative ideas of how to do this when maybe a committee doesn't have the funds to hire, and yet it would be an idea to hire somebody. And so whether or not maybe a potential strategic planner might volunteer their time, and somehow the committee gives them recognition back, maybe in a newspaper article. Maybe if you've got a university or college close by, you could access somebody who's doing that kind of training, and maybe they could come and take on strategic planning in your committee as one of their projects for their degree. So there could be creative ways to go about doing that, and I guess also to go to organizations and fundraise for it, because I think a lot of organizations, and I'm talking about service organizations, they like to give, rather than just give to the general pot, they like to give to something. So possibly you could fundraise to a community service organization to really help the group overall by supporting the contracting of a strategic planning consultant to help the group. So those are just a couple of ideas. We have one more question. And so the question is, what constitutes capacity building? If suicide is a result of anxiety and mood disorders, do you actively build integrated treatment programs? So let me read that again. What constitutes capacity building? If suicide is a result of a mood or anxiety disorder, do you actively build integrated treatment programs like MI and addictions ICPs at CAMH? So unfortunately, I cannot help you, the panelists, out on letting you know what MIs and ICPs are, but does anyone have any comments on that?
Sure, I can make a couple of comments. So we look at, I look at it as like a circle here. So we look at prevention, intervention, and postvention. So we look at all of those pieces. I think it's Judy that asked the question. But for example, in terms of capacity building, I mean, it means different things. And the mental health leads in all school boards are doing something a little bit different. But for example, here our Catholic School Board has initiated the Resiliency Initiative based out of Calgary. And so that's working from JK right through to 12. So that would be an example of capacity building here on what they're trying to do in terms of building more resiliency right from the beginning so that you're building that resiliency in. And then another example, although it's not motivational interviewing or the addictions program, but something we're really excited about here is the Skills for Safer Living group, which there's 5 in Canada that have currently run. It's out of St. Mike's Hospital in Toronto, and it's a 20-week psychosocial, psychoeducational group for individuals who have attempted suicide. So there's been about 70 groups that have run, but all adult meaning 18 plus. But we're happy because we just started a pilot group 2 weeks ago for 16 to 18, and we're just about to launch a group in March for 14 to 16-year-olds, and it's not for somebody that's attempted, but somebody that's struggling with suicidal thoughts, and then at the same time there will be a concurrent group running for the parents to also be learning these skills. So it's a little bit of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, some CBT in there, motivational interviewing, it's all wrapped in, so we're really excited about that. I hope that answers your question, Judy.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Vanessa, Anne-Marie, anything to add to that?
I was just going to add that that the treatment end is kind of beyond the scope of what Grey Bruce We Care project is doing. Our project is really about culture shift and changing thinking and access to services. The treatment options are really the individual partners around the table would be the ones doing that at this point. So I guess different projects will have different scopes, and that is beyond the scope of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Great discussion. Vanessa, any comments?
I don't think so. I don't know how I would particularly answer that question.
Okay.
Nancy would probably know a lot more about that. Yeah, I sort of what Anne-Marie kind of said, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. And I do understand that a lot of the community groups are looking more at a more general as opposed to the treatment aspects. A lot of times those that are providing treatment sit on the committee, yet the committee itself is not providing or looking at providing treatment. So I don't believe there are any other questions. I want to begin wrapping up, and I'm going to start off by saying thank you to Tana and Anne-Marie and Vanessa for the wonderful job you have done. We sent out emails, asked people, invited them to come and be part of this panel without really having being able to say that we've ran anything like this for our e-forum. So this is actually something different. My hope is that those of you who have been listening have gained some information. I also hope that if you have questions to Tana or Anne-Marie or Vanessa, that you reach them in their respective communities. And, you know, each of you have provided us with a wealth of information, and I know that I have thoroughly enjoyed this last hour and a half. So other than that, I'm just going to do some final. We do have one upcoming e-forum, which will be our final one, and it is on a collective impact, sustaining and growing our community collaborations. That's going to be taking place on February the 24th in the same time span of 11 to 12:30. And then just a reminder, please remember to fill out your evaluation survey following the forum. It will pop up as you close down, and you can select to answer in French if you would prefer. The recording from today's session will be made available online following this event at www.togethertolive.ca/eforums. And if you would like a participant certificate from today's session, please email us at togethertolive. There are other things that I know are being shown right now. Exactly. The screen is doing the talking for me. So if there's nothing else, I'm just checking in all my screens. No, I think that is it. So I'm going to start waving off and saying goodbye. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for the questions that were brought in by Judy Tyson. And then thank you especially to Tana and Vanessa and Anne-Marie. We couldn't have done this without you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay.